the missing skier who teleported from New York to Sacramento. There's been some new information put out, and we're going to check it out. Coming next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello everybody, welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. I'd like to thank everybody before we start for subscribing. I really like the fact that you guys are interested in this kind of material, historical based news. And so that's what we're trying to bring to you. And if you like this kind of stuff and you want to support us even more, think about a sponsorship as a producer or associate producer on Patreon. All right, well, let's get right down to business. Of course, the big story still is this missing skier who ended up disappearing from New York and reappearing out in Sacramento 6 days later. Now, if you haven't seen the first video I made about this, I'm just going to put a link right here and go ahead and check that out. So in the first video, I'll just go over it very quickly. We only had a little bit of information. And to summarize very quickly, the guy was skiing with his buddies in New York. He disappeared. They called out all kinds of different emergency people, including Homeland Security. And the guy's wallet, his car, everything that had to do with him was left at the ski lodge. And he somehow was able to get across the country. Without any ID, any form of communication. And now there has been some recent developments about the guy actually having a credit card now and getting a cell phone. Now, I don't know about you, but that really sounds a lot like a UFO story and swamp gas. Because if he had a credit card to begin with, why didn't they say that? All that we knew before was that the guy had somehow hurt his head and he had ended up on a truck. But now he suddenly has a credit card and a phone. Now, before we go into this thing about the phone and the credit card, let's look at the truck. Where did the truck come from? I don't know if you've ever skied before, but this guy somehow ended up on a truck in a full ski outfit with ski boots on, apparently. And was this was this truck, was it at the ski lodge? Was it unloading something on its way to California? How did that guy get on this truck? And especially if he had hit his head, which apparently would have happened on the ski slope. So he hit his head and then he got into a truck. Now, one of my viewers has made an interesting comment that I'm going to post here, and she points out that if he hit his head, why is he still wearing his glasses and his helmet? Now, there are some questions that we're going to just go ahead and go down and answer. And the first one is that we have to get out of the way is a lot of people are saying, well, why was Homeland Security there? Why were they involved in it? Well, it's very simple. This guy, this firefighter, was from Canada. So he is not a U.S. citizen, and he suddenly disappears. So that, I mean, if it had been anybody else, probably they wouldn't have even bothered with it, like an illegal alien or a terrorist. But since it's a high-profile firefighter, they had to get involved because he is a foreign national. Okay, so now, he suddenly has a credit card, right? Before, all of his stuff had been left back at the ski slope, so now he has a credit card. And apparently with that credit card, he was able to purchase a phone and call his wife and get a haircut. Now, if you are not familiar with how the government works and covers up things that they don't know anything about, this is a pretty good example. So what they're doing is they're just giving the first possible explanation that comes to their head, irregardless of whether it makes any sense or not. So they said that, oh yeah, there's a guy and he talked about a truck, and then suddenly he's got a credit card, and then, oh no, now he's got a cell phone. So it's just like the magic bullet. They just keep adding things in to make the story seem plausible, so that your Joe Sheep sitting at home will go, well, I guess that makes sense. But in fact, when you look at everything, of course, it doesn't really make sense at all. So the last thing that I'm going to point out here is that I still think that the guy teleported across the nation. I don't think there's any other rational explanation for it. And if you want to know why, then it's in my other video. But I'm also going to add that he was not dehydrated. And he was not hungry, yet he had been missing for 6 days. So if he had been traveling on our time, his body would have gone through the normal cycles of having to eat and drink water. And after 3 days, he would have died. But somehow he was still in the same clothes, in the same ski boots, and somehow managed to get around. Now, the last thing I'm going to say is very important, and that probably 99% of the people who follow this case don't even pick up on it, but I'm going to tell you what it is. Now, in my first video, I pointed out, I had picked out some of the points from the story that was done by the NBC affiliate out of Albany. And one of the points that I put in that video, although it might have seemed like irrelevant, was that the little note that they had not discussed whether or not charges would be filed. Now, why would they file charges against a guy who is disoriented, obviously has gone through some kind of ordeal? I mean, why is that even important to put out? I mean, you could say, tell the guy, okay, well, if we find out you're up to some malfeasance, there's going to be trouble. But why would they make a public announcement that they haven't decided whether or not charges would be filed? Is it because they suspect him of something, or is it because they want him to go along with their story no matter what, because the trouble that he could find himself in is going to be much worse than anything he could find himself in for looking like an idiot who ends up on a truck and doesn't know where he was for 6 weeks and is going to have this follow him for the rest of his life. Better to look like an idiot who ends up on a truck and not be able to account for himself, rather than somebody who has experienced some kind of a wormhole teleportation kind of deal. So for everybody sitting and watching this, they're probably going, okay, it sounds good. They've got all of the explanations for it, and so everything's covered and everything's explainable. But as you all know, nothing's explainable. And that's why we have Deceptions of the Ages news. We'll see you next time.